Thanks so much to all my patrons. Join now to help support the channel and help pick the books that I review. Link in the description. And I am done. Okay, so I just got done reading The Fury of the Gods. This is the third and final book in the Bloodsworn trilogy by John Gwynne, and I want to give you my unedited thoughts on finishing this book, which was literally just right now. So, this is a tough one for me. I'm going to give this one 3 stars, and that's a rough one for me because if you're familiar with my thoughts about John Gwynne, I love John Gwynne. He's one of my favorite authors. He's still one of my favorite authors, but I feel like this is definitively my least favorite book of the, how many books has he done now? 10 books? And because I've given almost all of his books 5 out of 5s. I gave one of his books a 4 or 4.5. But yeah, this one had a lot of issues that I feel like the other ones didn't have. And I also feel like if you've read the first 2 books, and we'll talk a lot more about this, and you really loved them, there's a really good chance you're going to love this one too, and that I'm going to be highly in the minority of people that feel the way I do. I'll let you know why I feel that way, and maybe you'll agree. I'm certainly not trying to convince you because I love John Gwynne, but you know, I got to give you my honest thoughts, and this is very tough because also. Like, look, I begged to get an early copy of this book because I was so excited about it. And so I was asking his kids who have a booktube channel if they could send it to me, and they got me a copy very kindly. Thank you so much. And so I feel really pained to have to give, not a glowing review to something that I kind of feel like I was expected myself almost assuredly to be able to give. So yeah, I feel really bad, but at the same time, my promise to myself and to this channel was that I'll always give my honest opinions, and I wouldn't want to have a channel if that's not what I did. I just want to talk nicely about everybody and be kind. You'd stop trusting me, in my opinion, and I wouldn't be fun to be able to do that. But I'm certainly not relishing having to talk about this. And as I knew that I was going to be giving this book a lower review, I've been dreading the moment where I had to sit down in front of this camera and explain these things. But before we go into the things that I had a problem with, let's talk about the positives here. So much about what made the first 2 books great are in this book again. We've got our main characters who get, they get man, I'm struggling for how to say this in a non-spoiler way, but they all get definitive arcs here. They all get an ending where you're going to feel some sort of level of satisfaction, whether that be a good thing or a bad thing. I'll let you read that and figure it out. But I've come to know and to really care about these characters, and more than anything, I've really loved this world and this world building and everything that's kind of this huge clash of titans that are coming together, these monstrous beasts that are fighting, which I love that in fantasy, and I wish more people would do the bigger and the badder thing where they bring out these huge ultra mega beasts fighting each other. That's awesome stuff. Give me more of that Godzilla type stuff in my fantasy stories. For some reason things are so scaled down in so many ways, and I want them bigger and badder and cooler, and that's fun. And so we got a lot of that here. We got a large amount of that vengeance and redemption sort of arcs that you've come to kind of expect out of John Gwynne, and certainly come to expect out of a series like this, which are all about Vikings and a culture that I've always been not obsessed with, but certainly fascinated by. I feel like everybody kind of thinks Vikings are really cool, and I've certainly never read a Viking-inspired fantasy story, so having something fresh and new in that regard is always a good thing. And so so much of that is here. We got the classic John Gwynne battle sequences, and I view John Gwynne as one of the greatest, fantasy battle sequence writers. He writes in such a vivid and descriptive way that makes you feel like you're in there in the action, and we certainly got that here with, major set piece battles that are iconic and that are fun to read. And so I suspect again that you're going to love this because, I mean, most people love all major popular fantasy books. So, very, very, very seldomly is a major book come out and everybody's like, oh, that sucked. That's just not how it works. You get people on the outline that end up feeling a certain way because of their certain preferences, but the vast majority of people end up enjoying them. But I would say similar things to a review that I just did a couple days ago, or depending on when this video comes out, yesterday or 2 days ago, when I reviewed 𝐒𝐻𝑏𝑟𝑖NGER, and I gave it the weakest score out of the Stormlight Archive books. And a lot of people look at 𝐒𝐻𝑏𝑟𝑖NGER as like one of the best books in the series, if not the best book in the series, thus far at least. And the reason that they love it is the reason I don't love it as much as some other people do, and it's because it almost goes for too much. There's, the battles are so big and so grand, and they take so many pages to describe that it almost takes out the energy out of them and out of me as the reader to be able to get through them. And it takes out the grandness of it when you go too big. And I think that's what this one this one did for me, at least. I almost wish it was scaled back a little bit. I almost wish there was less battles. I almost wish that you got to savor the moments that they did happen rather than have a whole book of high octane action that it just went for too much to be a final book in a series. And I think this is almost unfair to John Gwynne, but as I'm reading this, I constantly kept, in my head at least, comparing it to Faithful and the Fallen. Faithful and the Fallen is a series that I adore, and I think I gave all the books, and I did. I gave all books of that 5 out of 5s. I love that series. I love everything about that series, and especially the final book, Wrath, which I adore. And I kept waiting for the moments that made Wrath so great to happen here. And then it didn't. I feel like, Wrath was such a far superior ending book. And maybe it's because it had more pages to it. It was a 4-book series instead of a 3-book series. There was more time to expand on these characters, to keep the battles a little bit more spaced out, to get this grander scale to things that this one wasn't able to do. And God, I'm really having trouble figuring out how to talk about this without spoilers. I'll say a few things that I feel like I definitively can say. One is, this cover is both a blessing and a curse. All the covers of this series are wonderful. You have this awesome, huge, monster. In this case, it's a huge snake. And you get the contrasting with a little teeny boat here for scale. It's amazingly done, and it draws the reader in. And I suspect that the covers here have sold a lot of copies for this series. And I love them. They're so cool. They're some of my favorite covers. But they're spoilers, and I hate that about books. All 3 of the books have an enormous spoiler just sitting on the cover, and it kills me, because the moment that this awesome snake comes out should be a shock. You should be like, oh, snap, that happened, because it's not telegraphed. It hits you out of the blue. But I knew it was going to happen. And it's set up in a point of the book where that's like the major crux of the story. And to already expect that, and a major, what's supposed to be a twist, and there's no way to avoid this. There's only one cover for this book. This book doesn't have multiple covers like a lot of other, long-time fantasy stories. Maybe it will eventually, but I doubt it. This cover's awesome. So why would they change it? And it probably leads to its success in a lot of ways, and contrasts so much with the rather boring covers of the other John Gwynne books. Books I love, but don't tell the story at all, and probably don't do themselves any favors. But I infinitely prefer those kind of boring covers because they don't reveal any of the story. And you certainly could have done like a Viking-inspired covers here that were cool and badass that didn't show you something. Or, shocker, show a cover for something that's in the previous book, and then you're not feeling spoiled. The cover with the dragon on the first book, make that the second book cover or something like that, and don't make me know that that's going to happen in the first book, and the huge wolf, make that this one or something. I don't know, but it's frustrating and killed me here, because it could have been so much better on this grand reveal that ends up not being revealed ultimately. The bigger problems I had with this story, though, are the way that the character arcs concluded, and the way that the mechanics of how it went down, because the final quarter of this book is like a huge battle, and I think it's too long. I think it overstays its welcome. But what you end up getting towards the final stage of this book is like chapter after chapter after chapter of characters facing off against their nemesis, and a face-off that you could have predicted books ago. And the conclusion to that face-off is something that at least I would have fully expected to happen. And it's like one chapter we have, revenge, and we finally get it. And then the next chapter, another character, they get their revenge. And then another chapter, they get their revenge. And they're short chapters. They're like 5 to 10 pages. So it's just revenge, one-on-one battles, which don't make a lot of sense in a world where these huge wars are going on. And John Gwynne knows better than that because he writes awesome battle sequences and he knows how battles work. There's this chaos to battle, but, somehow these people keep getting faced off with each other. And, you get to see that. And it takes away so much after it happens 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times. And by the final times, you're like, man, this is just a formula we're going through. And it takes away all the passion that I had from it. And because there's so much battle in these books, in the first couple of books, I excused it more. But in the final book, we finally, come to see how this all, brings it all home. And ultimately what I felt like was I didn't care about these characters as much as I should because we didn't get to spend enough time with them. I didn't get to grow that passion for these characters that I would in a lot of other series, especially series that are a lot longer in the amount of books that we get. And that's unfortunate because I wanted to care about these characters. And, in something like in Faithful and the Fallen, we have these conclusions to character arcs that made me feels like teary-eyed, both from a good place and a bad place. And that's the emotions that I want out of a final book from a trilogy or a series. And I just didn't get any of that here. It felt cookie cutter, which is weird to say for something from Gwynne, where I feel like he's anything but cookie cutter in a lot of ways that he writes. And so it felt like the ending of this book was rushed. And there was just too much trying to get crammed in here. Too much time with the mechanics of the fighting and too little time with the resolution to these character arcs. And I, that's unfortunate for me. I also feel like, and maybe this sounds dumb, but when I think about, and I'm just kind of realizing this as I'm talking now, so maybe this sounds ridiculous when I look back on this, but in so many of my favorite fantasy stories that are epic fantasy stories, think Game of Thrones, think Stormlight Archive, think like Malazan, think First Law, think of all these different series that are wonderful and huge and sprawling and badass. Something that is in all of those stories is very different cultures throughout the books, and these clash of cultures coming together. And in a book with a bunch of Vikings fighting each other, there's one real culture, and it's the Viking culture. And so it's almost like everything is so samey, and I didn't get to see that, and it made everything feel different and epic in scale, because it all felt, even though we got this huge continent, and I'm looking at the map and I see that they're going these long distances, but everything felt so crammed in and tiny because it didn't feel like we're going to different countries and continents and getting a different spice for these different places. Even something like, A Song of Ice and Fire that mostly takes place, at least the war in Westeros, all takes place on one continent. But there's all these distinct, you got people in Dorne that are in the sand, you've got people living in the marshes and up north and in the cold and the stormlands and everybody's different. And even though they're all humans, it just feels unique. And everything just felt so bland and sterile here, even though the Viking stuff is really cool. And I'm not a writer, so, totally ignore this, but it would have been cool if Vikings were a part of the story, but we also had other parts of the story with them clashing with them. And so, yeah, that was a little bit of a, one of the criticisms that I had here. And God, there's something that I want to say that I don't want to spoil for you. But you know what? I don't want to talk spoilers here. So if you want to know my final criticism for the book, hop into my Discord. I'd love to chat with you about it. I have a room set up for Bloodsworn. I'd love to chat with you. And I can talk about, the other thing that I can't really even touch on here because it would spoil a pretty big part of the story. But yeah, so I know it sounds like I'm like, I hated this book. I didn't hate it. I just ultimately felt like, it was okay. And that in itself is a shock for me. That in itself is very disappointing, where in other books I might read that and be like, you know what, it's okay. You know, I don't feel like I wasted my time. It was okay. I'm not going to keep going in the series, but, you know, no big deal. And something where my expectations were so high, it feels like worse than it is. Even though, you know, still 3 out of 5, not a horrible score. But what I fear is people are going to watch this and be like, oh no, I don't want to finish the series now. And that's, you know, finish it. Because I suspect you're going to like it. I suspect a lot of the problems I had are not problems you'd have. And I'm not saying this just because I like John Gwynne. But I truly feel that way. Like I said the same thing about Oathbringer, right? And even though my reread review is out way after people have already read it, so I'm not convincing anybody not to read the book. But, you know, I said there and I say it here is, you know, you're probably going to love it. And, you know, and I'm not somebody that would like never want to say anything bad about like Sanderson, because I've ripped on a lot of Sanderson books, namely the second era of Mistborn. I don't think anybody should read those. I think they're horrible. You know, some of his secret project stuff I thought was bad. And so I would say the same thing here. And if I truly hated it, if I truly didn't think you should read it and it didn't have merit, I'd say that. You know, but I'm not saying that. So yeah, take it for what it is. Those are my thoughts. I feel bad about them, but you know, they are what they are. So thank you so much for watching this. And as always, happy reading to you. Thanks again to all my patrons, with a special shout out to my Ascendant tier and Librarian tier patrons: Amy, Alex P, Anna G, CJ, Doused, Darren, Daniel O, JD, Jonathan, Josh, Nathan T, Ned's Book Channel, 𝗟𝗏𝗄𝐴, Ron Reich, Russell, Ryan L, Sydney Baker, Slay, Tahir, Anna, Andra, Blair, Brock, Evan, Joe UK, Kat Mick, Marcus, Michael Sugarman, and Sky. Thanks for sticking to the end of this video, and if you want to watch some more content from my channel, click over here and I've got some good videos for you. Thanks so much.